We are recording, ready to go, Michael.
Thanks, Josh. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michael Durline, Deputy Executive Director of Policy and Research for the State Board. I have just a few comments at the very beginning of this, and then sorry, Josh, Chrissy might need a little support. She just asked what the password was, so if somebody could reach out to her, I'd appreciate it.
Will do.
Just a few comments in the beginning. Otherwise, I'll be quiet. We'll turn it over to a few other folks who are joining us for this important discussion. Just a reminder, member learning sessions are optional sessions for our board members, really intended to dive into specific topics of interest. We record these sessions so that if members are not available, we can send it to them after the fact. But we've had quite a few interesting conversations, and this one stems from a recommendation that came before the board back in May from the Department of Education to approve alternative assessment pathways for candidates who are unable to, but are close to passing content assessments. So we wanted to take this time to really dig deep into that, give our members a chance to ask any questions they may have of the testing vendors who have joined us today. And I will leave it at that and turn it over to Taylor Reed from the Department of Education to introduce our guests and kick off the conversation.
Good afternoon, Taylor Reed. I serve as a Senior Director of Educator Licensure with the Department of Education. Very excited and thankful to be here with you all this afternoon. As Michael said, this learning session is around the alternative assessment options or assessment flexibilities, as we've been calling them as a whole. The kind of origination of this item actually came from the Licensure working group that Michael leads with SBE, and of course we participate in. And this was a recommendation from the Licensure working group that came about actually some time ago, I believe sometime in about a year or so ago. And to ensure that we were thoughtfully going through the operations and implementation of things, we first wanted to take before the board options for expanded assessments, which has recently been adopted. So we now offer a suite of both ETS assessments and Pearson assessments. And then from there, we've now brought this item on first reading before the board, and there were some very thoughtful questions. And so we wanted to bring everyone together to have this learning session. And then from here, we are anticipated to bring this item back on final reading in November before the board. So I did just want to make that clarification that it will go in November before the board for final read. And with that, I would like to turn it over to my friend Lisa at ETS to introduce herself, and then Matt from Pearson as well. So Lisa, if you want to start us off with your introductions, then we'll go to Matt. And Lisa, I think you might be muted.
I was. Sorry. Are you seeing the right screen? I think I have. Okay. Because it has a red box around, so I got a little nervous. Hi, my name is Lisa Cologne-Durham. I'm a Director of Educational Partnerships for ETS. Thank you, Taylor, for that introduction. I do bring with me about 28 years in education. I actually served as a certification director for the state of Idaho. I also served as a middle school mathematics teacher, an elementary principal, and I actually did serve 1 year as a professional development director for school boards across the state of Idaho. That was a great experience. So I'm really excited to bring some of the work that we've done at ETS here on this innovation and flexibility. So I am going to introduce two paths or two innovations and flexibility to you today. So please stop me if you have any questions along the way. I'm just really excited about to share this information. We'll just take a second to talk about ETS. All of you most likely know that ETS is a global nonprofit leader in assessment and research. We've served over 75 years and been at the forefront in developing assessments like Praxis, but we've also done GRE and TOEFL. And you most likely know Praxis as that teacher licensure assessment. But we are really expanding our offerings, comprehensive research-based solutions, really to design to support educators all along the way. And one of them that I'm very passionate about, as many of you know or have heard, is Proethica, which is our professional development series on ethics training, scenario-based learning aligned to the Model Code of Ethics for Educators. So every time I can talk about that, I do, and I didn't pass up an opportunity. So, but let's get into what you're really here for today, and that is test innovation and flexibility. I'm really going to talk about two of them. Praxis Bridge, which is really that targeted learning modules for candidates who narrowly miss passing. Rather than sitting for a full retake of the assessment, they work through a professional development module that's focused on that individual test taker's area of greatest difficulty. The other flexible option that we have worked on is what we're calling Praxis Steps. And that allows candidates options to how they even start or take the test. They can either take it one section at a time, or they can retake just the section that they didn't pass. And Steps is being introduced with our elementary education fundamentals. But let's talk about the bridge. So what is Praxis Bridge? As I introduced before, it's specifically for candidates who narrowly miss, and it's really important that it is about one standard error of measurement. So Tennessee sets the cut score, and if those candidates score within one standard error of measurement of Tennessee's cut score, if Tennessee adopts this, then they would be eligible for Bridge. It is based on the candidate's score, and we align a module specific to that candidate's area of greatest difficulty. So we take a look at our test blueprint, we look at the subcategories, we look at that, and it's really aligned to that specific test taker's area of greatest need. It includes content overview, it includes knowledge checks, practice items to really affirm their understanding of the material. Why states have really liked this is it's an accelerated path. If a test taker doesn't pass the test, they have to wait 28 days prior to taking or retaking the test. If they qualified for Bridge, they don't have to wait that time. They can start right away and purchase that Praxis Bridge module. So it's that reduced time to retake. Again, we talk about the fact that we align that area of greatest need to the module that's going to be aligned to that candidate. It's seamless reporting. We do all the back work on our end. We send the information to the candidate. There's nothing that the department or the board needs to do on this once it's implemented. It's all done with our systems. As a former math teacher, I love pictures and models. And so this is just a flow chart of how that works. So if I'm a test taker and I take the Praxis test, I score greater than one standard error of measurement, then I need to retake the test. I need to study, maybe focus, look at the score report, focus on my area of greatest need, and then I'll just retake that test. However, if I narrowly missed, meaning I scored within one standard error of measurement, I have this Bridge option, which again includes content overview, which I affectionately call reteach, right? It's the ability to reteach the content. They have practice items with annotations, and then there is a knowledge check. We have included a lot of tests already for this Bridge eligibility. And the price, we get that question a lot, is $50 for the module. The other thing I will point out is states can adopt a 3-year retroactive. This was really something that we got from our pilot states when we piloted this a couple years ago. They wanted the ability to go back 3 years and say anyone that may have qualified for the Bridge within those 3 years, we're going to give it back or go back 3 years so that those candidates, you don't miss those, oh, I just tested and now you implemented it. So it really was this ability for us to go back and help those candidates, especially those that just tested. So how it works, we actually notify the candidate as soon as their scores are received that the Praxis Bridge is an option for them. It also shows in their account. Once they purchase the module, they have 6 months from the date of purchase to complete it. It's asynchronous, which means they can do it on their own time. They can actually do it on their phone. And we know how many of our younger, I hate to say younger because I don't want to think I'm that old, but our younger generation likes to use their smartphones and things. They do get a certificate of completion, and we actually resend score reports to all of those entities that received the original score. For reporting purposes, we get this question a lot. What about Title II? What about our data? We actually will showcase this as what we call an alt pass. This allows the state and educator preparation programs to really look at the data and see how many of their candidates may be using this alt pass. The state can take a look at it. You can see the section on the left. This image is of an actual score report for a candidate, where the one on the right is data that would be seen at an institution level, so like one of your colleges or universities, and also at the state level. So you can see here how many have passed the bridge or passed this test under the bridge. So that data is there and is disaggregated so that anyone who wants to use the data for just to review it can look at it in that fashion. And again, for Title II purposes, an individual who uses Bridge would be a next attempt pass. So if they were trying that test and they qualified for Bridge on the first attempt, when they did Bridge, it would be considered a second attempt pass. The next couple of slides I'll just go through because I think Taylor has this presentation in the show, but I just wanted to showcase all of the different options or tests that we have available for Bridge. And I highlighted the bold options that are currently adopted by Tennessee. So we have the elementary subjects, we have core, teaching, reading, elementary, the principles of learning and teaching, English language arts, special education, most of the middle school areas, para pathways, mathematics, and we are constantly adding additional modules. I know there was some questions about what does those modules look like, so I'm just going to take a few minutes to talk about the modules and how they were created. They are designed to be high quality. They are direct alignment to the praxis, content, skills, and cognitive demands of the blueprint that was adopted by the state. It's selected using praxis research. We use candidate performance data, subject matter expert review to ensure relevance to beginning educator practice. The module assignments, so those are the assignments part, are tailored using the data-driven process that identifies and targets each candidate's areas for growth. So you can be rest assured that what they're doing is completely and totally aligned to the test blueprint and aligned to that specific candidate's area of greatest need. This particular slide showcases that if you were doing the elementary and I qualified for Bridge for mathematics, there are 3 different modules that I could be assigned, but I would only be assigned one of those 3. I'm not going to have all 3, and I'm going to be assigned the one that I had the greatest area of need. So for mathematics, that could have been algebraic thinking if I didn't pass within 1 standard error of measurement. For another candidate, that might be the numbers and operations. So one thing I want to make sure is that they're only going to be assigned 1 module per each of these, and it would be in the subcategories and identified at their as their area of greatest need. And we also provide accommodations, closed captioning, etc. on all the modules. So the way it is completed is, again, there's a content overview, then they're given practice items that includes that are aligned to the content. It includes feedbacks, we have glossing, I'll show a little bit of that, and then we have hint, and then they go to the knowledge check, and this is where the accountability is. The first time they take the knowledge check, they have to achieve a 75 to 80% in order to get the certificate of completion. If they don't pass it, they have to go back and they can go through the content module again, the overview, the practice items. But for any subsequent attempt, they have to get 100%. So the first time they take it, they can get a lower threshold, but for any other time that they take it after that, it is a 100% threshold in order to complete the bridge module. The next couple of slides just showcase the learning management system that they would go through, so you can get a look at what a candidate might experience. This particular one is for our physical science section. We typically have all of the different areas on the left-hand side that the user or the candidate could go through. We give them course outcomes, learning objectives. This is an example of the learning course. This is a diagram of the evaporation, transpiration, and so they can click any of these to highlight. So it's a very interactive experience on this content. Science is not my area of expertise. This one is mathematics. And so this is an example of where they can hover, or that's what we call glossing or hover, where they can get the definition. Again, this would be all the practice items. This is not the knowledge check. This is them going over and being retaught the information. We also give them hints. We have some distractor analysis as well. This is incorrect. This is correct, so that they can find out where maybe their thinking was misguided, and then why this answer is correct. So again, that whole idea of reteaching. The next couple of slides, I did some data digging for Taylor as we talked about this. This right here is best attempt. So if I was looking at the 3 years, so because there's a 3-year retroactivity or retroactive option, we wanted to see what that impact might be for Tennessee candidates. And as you can see here, if I look at best attempt for candidates, we have about 128 candidates that would have qualified potentially for bridge, which means they did score within 1 standard error of measurement on their best attempt. And so you're looking at, and some of these might be the same candidate, some of them might not be the same candidate, but these are just numbers so that you can see that on best attempt. And then I also gave you a slide on first attempt because that's where that big one is. You know, you had about 2,900 candidates within that 3-year period. Of those 2,900 candidates on their first attempt, 222 of them could have qualified for bridge and taken this option rather than a retake. Are there any questions about bridge before I go on to our other innovation? I promise that won't be as long. Okay.
I do have some questions.
Yes.
Okay. So I'd love to get a copy of this PowerPoint also. Lisa, I'm Anna Maxwell. I'm one of our state board members and a previous educator, retired happily. So a couple of questions that I have. Do knowledge check questions change if the candidate does not meet the 75 to 85% pass the first time that they take the re-attempt, if you will, or will they be given those same questions just in a different order?
They'll be given the same questions, but there's no hints or anything on those. So they would have to go back, do some extra learning, and then it would be the same questions in a different order.
Okay. And does it record the number of attempts that they go through before they achieve that 100%?
I don't know if we collect that data or not. That is something I can follow up on. I know that they would not get a certificate of completion or say that they have moved on or got a pass unless they get the 100%.
Okay. Has there been any thought given to having a different question bank related to the same skills being asked for that second attempt?
Yes, there has been.
Also, I'm wondering, do you have any performance data on states that have used the Praxis Bridge, like the teacher takes that, they're, meet the criteria for licensure, they're hired, and I'm just wondering if there's any longitudinal data that's been collected to show that the teachers that have had to take the Praxis Bridge have become effective educators.
That's a really great question. Most states do that on their own because they all have defined effective or high quality based on their evaluation systems. And every state does that. ETS doesn't collect that data because we don't have any evaluation or student achievement data, that kind of stuff. But I do know the states that I have worked with that have used that data, they are following that, and at this time I've not seen any difference. Because one thing that I think is important is that it has to be within one standard error of measurement. And on my slides that I'll send to Taylor to forward to you all is that we do have an explanation of what standard error of measurement is, and then this idea of false positives and false negatives and why one standard error of measurement was chosen. It was very specific. Typically that equates, depending upon the standard error of measurement, to potentially 1 to 5 questions missed on the actual exam.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
I have another question, and it's just a clarification. So for this bridge, if they fail the praxis, they get to do a self-paced modules where there's that knowledge check. There's no fidelity, there's no accountability. They could let someone else take that, and there would be no way of knowing that, correct?
That is possible, yes. I mean, it is. There's no monitoring. There's no proctor. There's no piece of that. Technically, yes, they could do that.
And what's the percentage of teachers that do this that actually don't pass? Because I would think it would be really hard to not pass if you're giving them multiple infinite amounts of time to pass it.
Correct. The only reason that they would not go pass a praxis bridge on an alt pass is if they didn't finish it. You're correct. They would have to basically choose not to complete it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
One more question, Lisa. What types of accountability and fidelity checks are in place? I'll need you to kind of remind me, it's been a long time, that are in place when a student or candidate does go in to take a praxis test. I'm going to show how old I am. Is it still site-based, or can they take it online? Can you briefly just give me what the current accountability measures are?
Sure. So when they take a full test, we do have at-home options, but that is an online proctor. We go through a huge test security process. They have to have the camera. They have to showcase the entire room. There could be no windows, module, those kind of stuff. They have to showcase the desk. So if it's an at-home, there is a huge security piece that they have to go through in order for that. And there is a human proctor on the other side of that the entire time that they take the test. Otherwise, they're taking it at a test center. And again, all of those checks, probably what you remember, where there's a proctor that's in the actual room. You have to leave all of your material in a locker before you can go in. There's video recording. We also do record the online as well. And we have the ability to look at all of the when they access their computer, if they're taking it at home, we can see any software that might be running in the background to make sure they're not using that. So we put a huge amount of protocols in that for our live assessments.
I have maybe a quick question, but I thought that was an interesting data point you just shared. Hopefully I understood it correctly. You said one standard error is typically between 1 and 5 questions missed. Is that right?
Yes, depending upon the test and depending upon what the actual standard error of measurement is. The lower the standard error of measurement, it would be less questions. The larger the standard error of measurement, it could be a greater amount of questions.
I would assume that changes like year to year, or so is that a bit of a moving target, or how do you all, I guess the broader question is, how are you all using information you're now getting from these programs to help inform the tests themselves. Like if you're seeing patterns in questions that candidates are getting wrong and they're having to come back and do the bridge program or retake, it feels like you're maybe now getting more granular data than you, or maybe not, maybe you always had and use this data, but just you kind of see where I'm going with that question.
Yeah, Michael, we've always had the psychometrics on the back end. We have a huge psychometrics, a part of our division at ETS. And so we do what's called the differential item functioning analysis. We are always constantly testing 20 questions that are actually not scored to ensure validity and reliability of our assessments. So I think that goes to the broader piece that we were talking about. We also update the standard error of measurement every year. So we put out a technical report that usually comes out in August of each year. And so you're right in that it could impact, but the way you calculate a standard error of measurement is you subtract that from the cut score set by the state, and then you round up. So there would need to be a significant change in the standard error of measurement. Typically there isn't a huge change, but it can happen. Like one might go from 7.9 to, or maybe like 6.1 to 5.9. That would have an impact the following year once that new report comes out. But that's why we don't actually put out what are the cut scores. We actually say one standard error of measurement from the state's cut score, and then we put a technical report out that shows all the standard error measurements.
That's another, sorry, one other thing you just made me think of is just this notion that you're using the state's cut score as opposed to the nationally recommended. However, many years ago, Tennessee moved to a place where virtually all of our assessments, the cut scores are set at the nationally recommended cut score. Somebody else on this call who's closer to the licensure work than I am at this point probably knows how many tests we have that are not set at the nationally recommended. But I guess that just the point there being we've set our cut scores fairly high, which may not, I don't know where other states are trending in that regard, but are you seeing that there are still states that have lower cut scores set below the nationally recommended? And, you know, that could obviously have an impact on the number of candidates that go through these programs.
Yeah, in fact, to your question is some states who have set their cut scores at a -1 SEM, I believe they're not my states, but there's a couple. I think Kentucky may have done it. I think it was Kentucky. So don't quote me on that because it's not my state, but I think Kentucky did. And I know Arkansas sets theirs as a -2 SEM. Neither one of those states use Bridge for that purpose. Most states that are using Bridge really were debating on whether or not they wanted to go to a -1 standard error of measurement for cut scores, and they loved this approach rather than going and setting all the cut scores down by -1, because it really still met that need of not having these false negatives by allowing those candidates another option of showcasing their information or reteaching. So it was kind of, it just gave those states another option than actually lowering the cut score. I know Arkansas, which is my state, is not using Bridge because that was a policy decision of setting all the cut scores to -2. And they don't want to go any lower than that. Hope that helps answer the question.
Yes, thank you.
I have one more question, and this is probably for the department. So what would keep the pass rate high? Like what if we change the pass rate, would that be a department decision or is that a state board policy decision? Because what would keep us from like lowering and lowering the pass rate?
I'm happy to speak to that, Chrissy. By the pass rate, do you mean the accepted cut score?
Yeah, for each test. So, I mean, if we just
Sure.
say we're going to have that national recommendation and it's 252 for one test. And then next year, we're like, well, why don't we take it to 242 and then 232? What keeps us from doing that? What are the, I
So
don't know.
the Cut scores are set in state board policy, so that would be an
Okay,
item that
that would
would
be an
need to
S.
be
Okay.
that would need to be brought before you all.
Okay, perfect.
And then, Lisa, one question. Can you go back to the chart that had the sort of 3-year retrospective? Great. And then I think I was reading that nationally about 12% of candidates qualify for bridge. Is that accurate?
It could be. It depends on each test. So I'd hate to like make a general statement. I'd have to go back and look at it, but it really depends on the tests. We have some tests that has a higher rate of qualification versus other tests that don't.
Okay.
But I
just
think
wanted to
that's
kind of look.
right on average.
Okay. So we're looking at a little over 10% of educators who qualify for this opportunity. I just wanted to kind of confirm that piece. On average, to your point, acknowledging that some exams have higher, some have lower, who sort of hit eligibility. I just wanted to make sure I had an accurate understanding of that.
Yeah. And one of the really positive things that came out of this that was unexpected is our candidates are reporting to us that knowing that they have this option going in has really reduced their test anxiety, because if you talk to candidates, they say they're not as afraid to not pass as they are afraid to nearly not pass, right? Someone who scores really low and is not even close to the cut score, they accept the fact that, like, okay, there's a lot. It's that fear of what if I miss it by 1 point or 2 points. And so a lot of the feedback that we were getting from all the states that have implemented this, and I think we're at 17 states nationally now that have implemented the Praxis Bridge option, they're getting more reports of reduced test anxiety, and what they're seeing is an increase in pass rates because of that reduction in test anxiety. So that was an interesting anecdotal, not numbers based, anecdotal feedback from the field. And I want to make sure I give enough time to my colleagues too. So I'm just going to go through this other thing within just a couple of minutes, which is a different option for flexibility, and that's our Praxis Steps. This is different than Praxis Bridge. This is that ability to allow candidates to take the test in smaller chunks. To the board members who talked about proctoring and test fidelity, this would all have the proctoring and accountability options within it. There would be no asynchronous on their own. This would all be proctored. But it really just allows candidates to take the test in smaller steps when they're ready to take it. And I'm just going to go to this particular diagram here. So if I'm taking mathematics, I could either take the full test 8003, and then if I don't pass, I can retake one of the steps. Again, this would be fidelity, this would be proctored, etc. These are the 3 steps that make up this test. So I could take it whole, or I could just take each step individually when I think I'm ready for that step. So we call those 2 options a progression path. So this is just an example of a progression path where Jordan first took the Earth and Space Sciences, passed it, then the Life Sciences passed it, then the Physical Sciences passed it, and then they'll get an overall cut score. Or Taylor, which would be me, this is the way I would most likely use it, is I would take the entire test 8005, realize from my results that the only test or subtest I didn't pass for step was the Physical Sciences step, and then I can just focus and retake that test or that step to get an overall passing. So again, it's just that extra flexibility, and they do all work hand in hand. This is an example of the steps, which I just showed you. But again, you still could have the bridge, which is someone with a near miss pass. This just shows an example of our new score reports that show all of that so that you can see it, and then just some resources. Again, I know I flew by that. I just wanted to make sure I give my colleagues some time too. So any other questions for me.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Kathy Cobb. I'm also the state board, one of the state board members, teacher representative. Just curious, do we have something in place that says how many times on the Praxis Bridge a teacher or a potential teacher can take these modules? Is there a cutoff? Because if you just continue to take test after test after test, eventually you're going to pass it. And I'm not quite sure that's going to label you as an effective teacher once you get into the classroom.
So I'll try to address that, I think, and give that back. So Praxis Bridge isn't a new test. It's a professional development module. So is your question related to the number of times? Is there a state policy on the number of times that they can actually take the test regardless of the bridge?
Well, you talked about the modules. If there's a those are their one standard deviation and don't pass the test. Am I understanding that they can then pay that $50 to take the test again?
So the bridge is a professional development module. They're not taking the test again. It's in lieu of taking the test. So if they scored within one standard error of measurement of the cut score set by Tennessee, then they have the ability to be retaught the content, go through practice items, and then do a knowledge check until they pass. I think there was a question like, yes, they can retake that knowledge check until they get 100%, and then they'll get a certificate of completion. So there is no minimum number of times set in our system that they could do the knowledge check.
And I think someone asked this question, but I'm not quite sure if I heard the final answer to it. Other states, the other 17 states that have bought on to this, is there a correlation between evaluation, teacher evaluation, and those that had to go through this kind of assessment?
And someone did ask that, and that was a lot of the states that have implemented this are following that on their own because it has to do with their own state evaluation system. The states that I have worked with have not seen any significant differences in reference to those candidates have used this and their evaluation systems. And again, every state has their own evaluation system and what is considered as part of that evaluation system.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
One last follow-up, and Michael, you probably can help me on this, or Nathan, or someone. Is it possible to, within state board rule or policy, to limit the number of Praxis Bridge attempts a candidate could take in order to gain licensure within a state?
That's
Or
a
is that
good question. I'm happy to jump in with my thoughts, but I'm sure others want to weigh in as well. I would think the answer to that is yes, though, Lisa, do your systems allow for monitoring that, reporting that, and then it would be up to the department to be able to implement that as well. So I think from a policy perspective, we can kind of say whatever we want, but if it's not implementable, then we could run up against some challenges.
Yeah, at this time, we haven't had any states request that. So I would have to go back and see if there was a way that we could limit that and what that would look like.
Have there been states that have done what's it called for the test? If you fail just one portion, they can retake it. What was the name of that?
Steps. Sorry,
Steps.
I know. Steps.
Yes, steps. Have some states adopted steps, but not the modules? Because I think that makes more sense. If they just fail a portion, they can retake that portion. Why would they retake portions of the test that they did really well on when they can just retake the failing section? Do you know any states have just done one and not the other?
We just implemented it with our new elementary foundations assessment, which was open in spring. We've only had 2 states adopt that right now. One of them does not allow bridge, and that is Arkansas, because they do a -2 SEM anyway, so they aren't. And then the other is West Virginia, and they do allow bridge as well as the steps. So they have chosen to implement both. The other states that are currently working on adoption that I work with do allow for both. I'm trying to, yeah, all of the ones that are currently adopting elementary steps are going to allow for both.
Thank you.
Well, if you have any other questions that come up, Taylor and Michael know how to get a hold of me. I'd be happy to provide any additional answers. And I do intend to be at board meetings. So if you have any questions about anything, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thanks, Lisa. Taylor, you want to introduce Matt?
Absolutely. At this time, we are going to hear from my wonderful friend Matt at Pearson, and he is going to present some additional alternative assessment options. So at this time, Matt, I will allow you to intro yourself a bit better than I have and take it away.
Thank you very much, Taylor. I appreciate that. This is Matt DeBartolomeo. I am with Pearson, joined actually by one of my colleagues, Jerry DeLuca, who's on the call as well. But at one point, Jerry didn't have sound, so he may be watching us just move our mouths. I haven't gotten an update from Jerry to find out if he actually can hear us or not, but I'm hoping he can. Jerry and I are both responsible for leading the activities for the program delivery of what's called the National Evaluation Series program in Tennessee. Let me share my screen. Can you all see that on your screens? You see nodding along, that's great. A thumbs up, thank you, Michael. All right, a little more about me and Jerry and Pearson first. You all have been working with ETS for a long time, and it's certainly understandable relative to your needs for the practice series. Just wanted to say that for my part, I've been with Pearson for 24 years. Throughout that time, my responsibilities have been wholly in educator licensure testing program development and delivery. Jerry joined us just in the last few years, and like I said, he and I are collaborating together to deliver the program in Tennessee. With respect to educator licensure assessments, we deliver educator licensure testing programs in about 35 states across the country. You can see those on the map here. They range from large states like New York and California and Florida and Texas to progressive states with respect to their education vision like Massachusetts. And then of course there's lots of states throughout the Southeast, not the least of which includes Tennessee, and you can see the others here. I wanted to kind of put that frame out there just so that you all know that what we're doing and where we're doing it. It's just that it just brings a little bit of credibility to the fact that we're delivering the National Evaluation Series to you all in Tennessee now. With respect to the flexibilities following the program launch of the National Evaluation Series program, Taylor introduced those to you all back at the May board meeting. I was there. I had an opportunity to listen in on the questions that you all had. Taylor reached out to me and said, hey, we'd really like to have an opportunity for you to talk more with the board members about some of the questions they have. And of course, we're here to talk about those two flexibilities that are already available as part of the National Evaluation Series program in some states, but not currently yet being used in Tennessee. And of course, it's up to you all to decide whether or not you adopt those. So, excuse me, there are two what we call the National Evaluation Series Flex assessments, and then the National Evaluation Series Testlet-based assessments. I'll give a brief explanation of both, and then we'll go into a little more detail about both of those. I would ask that if you have questions, please interrupt me, because just openly and transparently, I'm working with two screens. I've got the PowerPoint on one and my notes on the other, and I can't quite see you all at the moment. So please do feel free to interrupt me and ask questions. With respect to the flex assessments, this is the flexibility where a candidate who takes what I'm going to call the regular test, meaning the test that you would already be familiar with in terms of an examination that a candidate shows up and takes at a test center or takes it via online proctoring at home, we'll call that the regular test. The flex assessment is an opportunity for those candidates who narrowly missed the passing score to be able to submit a flex submission. And what they're doing is to provide a deep and rich analysis of a specific National Evaluation Series test competency that ends up demonstrating their depth of their subject matter knowledge in that respective area. And I'm going to show you one of those so you can actually see. And we'll talk more too about the being close to the passing score. The series testlet-based assessments are opportunities for candidates to take versions of these examinations in a test center or at home through online proctoring, whereby they take, bite-sized pieces, smaller modular units, each of which is anchored to a specific domain of knowledge and skills instead of sitting for one large examination. But cumulatively, those modular units add up to what we think of as one large exam. So why are we doing this? Well, we've had feedback, just like what you all have heard, that there are workforce pressures and access demands that are really reshaping how states think about assessment. Lisa talked about the various states that have adopted some of their programs. We're in a similar situation where the states that we work with are adopting such situations as well. And really what's happening is we've got stakeholders at all levels asking for flexible pathways, but doing so in a way that reduces burden, but without diluting standards. And of course, that's the key question that always comes up as it relates to board members and some folks in similar situations like yourselves. How do you get to be able to achieve that situation of reducing burden without diluting standards? So let's talk about the flex assessments first. Let's start with the basics of the who, the what, and the how. What we're talking about here is individuals who we've kind of come up in a couple conversations before, not the least of which includes the conversation with Lisa about candidates who are close to the passing score. Like ETS, we're using the standard error measurement as well. In the states that are using flex assessments right now, it is also within one standard error measurement. In terms of what they're doing an analysis of a topic on the specific assessment, though, that demonstrates the depth of subject matter knowledge. They are indeed doing this independently and completing one task and submitting it for scoring. What do I mean by submission? Well, we already have an ePortfolio platform where candidates are able to upload artifacts of information to be able to be associated with scoring for portfolio tools. We're applying that same methodology with our ePortfolio platform for candidates to be able to submit their flex assessments. So this actually already exists and it's already in place now, and we're having great success with it. So let's take a look at what one of these actually looks like. I'm going to use Foundations of Reading, the Foundations of Reading exam, as an example. I'm choosing this one because the Foundations of Reading test is used by lots of different states. Tennessee is one of them. And in Tennessee, Foundations of Reading is actually used or can be used for multiple endorsement areas. So people who seek to seek endorsements and take National Evaluation Series exams in areas like early childhood, elementary education, interventions, special education vision, and more, in addition to taking their content assessment in the respective discipline, they also have to take Foundations of Reading or another reading instruction competence assessment. So because it touches so many people or can touch so many people, I wanted to use this one as the example. So Foundations of Reading, that test, the regular exam, is organized into these 5 major domains of knowledge and skills that are on the left side of the table, like the first one saying Foundations of Reading Development. Those domains are further split into individual competencies that further describe what's being measured. So for example, in Foundations of Reading Development, there are these 4 competencies 1 through 4, each of which are even further broken up into specific descriptive statements. The document that actually displays all that is on the website right now. It's available for free. Anybody can go there and access it. You don't need to go register. Anybody can find that information. What's important about this is in the regular exam, there are 100 multiple choice questions that cover the 3 domains in the top part of the screen. And then there are 2 constructed response items or open response items that you would think of as essays that measure foundational reading skills and reading comprehension. So 100 multiple choice and 2 constructed response. So when a candidate takes that examination, in the open response area, in the example on the screen for competency or objective 10, they have a fair amount of work ahead of them to do relative to the open response or the essay that they would be responsible for. And this information is on the website right now too. So for example, and I'm going to do a little bit of reading here, so bear with me. In this particular competency or objective that they have to prepare an essay for in the regular exam, their charge is prepare an organized, developed analysis on a topic related to the development of foundational reading skills. But they have to be able to touch on the 4 elements that are on the bottom half of the screen. So they actually have to do the level of effort associated with analyzing, interpreting, and discussing accurately and appropriately the results of an assessment of foundational reading skills for an individual student. And they build on that to demonstrate the ability to select appropriate examples from a student's reading performance to identify a strength or a need. They demonstrate the ability to select and accurately describe the appropriate effective instructional strategy to help them improve. And then they have to demonstrate the ability to explain the effectiveness of that selected instructional strategy. So that's kind of a big deal. There's a fair amount of work to do at a test center. Because we want to make sure that we have that fidelity, and I know that that was a question that came up already, when it comes time for the flex, meaning the individual who got close to the cut score in taking what I'm going to call the regular examination, they're doing this exercise still from home, but there are specific elements to it that are particularly unique and make it what it is. So what are those things? First, they provide some background information. So these instructions that you see on the screen right now are part of the handbook that's available to the candidates. So first, they have to tell us which descriptive statements from the test objective that they're going to address in their submission, meaning on the previous screen, those numbers 1 through 4. And then they have to do some work to actually choose student data. So indicate the student data or examples you will use in your submission. They get to choose their own authentic student data or examples or sample data from relevant coursework that they actually took during their academic career to develop their topic and address the selected descriptive statements that are represented in the framework. Then they describe the topic that's being addressed, and then they actually have to provide us with the list of sources they're using to prepare the submission. In other words, it's got to be evidence-based. We want to know what they're using as a resource tool to be able to demonstrate evidence associated with their submission. That's just background information, though. The job then thereafter is we need from you a written analysis of up to 3 pages that address the specific descriptive statements that you are being asked to write to using the information you provided in your background information to us, and submit that 3-page document as well as the background information via our ePortfolio platform for scoring. So the individuals, I'm going to kind of do a little quick recap here. The individuals who are taking this are folks who have taken the regular exam, failed, but got close to the cut score, and have the option then to be able to go and take the flex if they so choose. They could just simply choose to retake the regular examination, but they have the opportunity to submit the flex. In either path, meaning the examination, the regular examination retake, or submitting the flex, if they pass either, they've met the requirement associated with, in this example, passing foundations of reading, and then they can, move on from there. If they fail the regular examination on the second attempt, or they fail the flex, they have an opportunity to come back and retake. Let me pause here and see if you all have any questions so far before I talk about testlets. Make it so I can see you all again on my screen.
I have one question. Hi, I'm Erica from the State Board staff, and my question is about, so in this example that you gave, I presume that that the reason that they failed the original exam was because of that specific open response question. They performed inadequately on it. What happened if they performed inadequately on the multiple choice section instead?
So that's Erica, nice to meet you. Great question. So I'm going to just be direct. Your assumption isn't correct, meaning they could have, when someone takes the regular exam, their performance on multiple choice and constructive response is pulled together to yield a single score of either passing or not passing. So in other words, they've got the 85 multiple choice questions here. and the 100, I apologize, 100 multiple choice questions here and the 2 constructive response items here. Those 2 things, multiple choice and constructive responses, the output of those are pushed together and they receive a pass or a fail on the collective assessment. So regardless of whether their performance was particularly poor in multiple choice and or the constructive response items, if they fail but they get close to the cut score, they have the opportunity to take the flex if they want. The reason why, though, that we are driving the flex the way that we are is that we want them to particularly demonstrate their knowledge and skills in this area in the flex because it's an integration of their knowledge and understanding, meaning the topics that are covered in the multiple choice section are ultimately integrated into the elements of the constructive response. So in other words, we're not just saying, well, you didn't do so hot in the multiple choice, just go back and take that particular piece. We'll talk about some of that stuff in testlets in just a second. Because the integrated approach to, and I'll go right back to here, the constructive response elements and therefore the flex is deep and broad. It covers all of the elements across the respective framework, all the elements that are being measured across the entire assessment.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions for folks? All right, I'm going to keep going then. Let's talk testlets. So testlets are a modular design. Historically, generally speaking, when you think about tests in a testing center or at-home online proctor testing, there have been generally, with a few different flavors, the top 2 on the screen test designs. Candidates either are exposed to a single assessment where they take one assessment that measures multiple domains of knowledge and skills, and has compensatory scoring across the respective domains, meaning a secondary mathematics assessment, for example, that covers, and I'm just making this up right now, algebra, geometry, and statistics, right? That's an assessment that covers those 3 domains of knowledge and skills, and we're producing a score. Another design is subtests, or you take those particular pieces and you break them out. So separate, shorter tests across multiple domains of knowledge and skills, requiring each individual subtest to be passed uniquely. So in the secondary mathematics assessment example, they take algebra, full stop. They take geometry, full stop, and they take statistics, full stop. And then they have to pass those things uniquely. We've been doing both for a long, long time. Came up with a testlet model to actually take the best of both worlds. So separate, shorter tests across multiple domains of knowledge and skills, allowing compensatory scoring across the testlets. It's kind of a lot going on in there, so I'm actually going to show you examples of what I mean. So start with that single test design. So just pretend that what you see in gray is a test, and it measures algebra, geometry, and statistics. And the passing score is just the black line, wherever that number is. Well, I'm going to show you my crude drawing, okay? And what I'm showing you is I'm overlaying performance of 3 people on what the test looks like. So the person in blue did particularly well on each of algebra, geometry, and statistics, above the passing score, right? So good for blue, they passed, they move on, they're headed towards getting their endorsement. The person in red performed particularly well in algebra, well enough in statistics, and not quite so hot in geometry. The person in yellow was sort of in a similar situation. They did, reasonably well in geometry and statistics, but not so much in algebra. Because it's a single assessment, and it produces a single score, in this particular example, because the test is compensatory, meaning in the red person's example, the algebra and statistics performance was particularly good. It helped pull them across the finish line for passing the assessment overall, despite the fact that they were a little lower in geometry. So in this model, it's a compensatory design, but it's a long test because there's a lot to cover. So someone could be, in a test center for, let's say, 4 hours. It's a long time. And they have to be ready for all those domains at the same time. You have to be ready for algebra, geometry, and statistics on that day of that respective examination. And if they do fail, they're coming back for the whole thing. Even if they blew algebra out of the water and they were fantastic. They're retaking algebra because it's a single assessment. So contrast that with subtests. So picture the same kind of gray area, but split it into 3 pieces. So now I've still got passing, but now I have 3 standalone elements that are subtests in algebra, geometry, and statistics. But so I have to uniquely pass each one. So if I take blue, yellow, and red, and I overlay them again, look what happens. Okay, so same level of performance, if you will. Blue performed particularly well, passed each subtest uniquely. Good for them. They passed the assessment overall. They can go get their math credential. In the compensatory model for the single test design, I said that red and yellow passed. Well, look what happens here. Red has passed algebra and statistics uniquely, but did not pass geometry. And Mr. Yellow passed geometry and statistics, but failed algebra. In this model, neither red nor yellow are going to get their endorsement in mathematics, despite the fact that they passed algebra and they passed 2 out of 3, because they have to pass everything to move on and get their endorsement for secondary math. So in the first model, all 3 of them moved on. The second model, only 2 of them did. But why would we want to do that? Well, there's some advantages here. They can take the subtests when they're ready for each one. So for example, if they covered algebra and let's say they were a 4-year degree program and they covered algebra when they were junior, but geometry and statistics when they were senior, maybe they want to get the algebra portion taken after their junior year. They bank that and put it away, and then they come back and take geometry and statistics after they have geometry and statistics training in their senior year. So there's benefits to being able to bank performance, but you do have to uniquely pass each one, and therefore it's not compensatory. So there are pros and cons to both models. So what I want to put in front of you then is, I'm going to keep on the left side of the screen the subtest model just as a reference point. And then I want to talk about what we're doing for testlets, which is on the right half of the screen. So what I'd like you to picture is a situation where you've probably all seen this. Picture a church, okay? And out in front of the church, there's the big plywood sign that they've painted in white. And over that, they've painted a thermometer, okay? And they're trying to raise money for the cracked stained glass window that they've got in the church, right? And you drive by one day and that thermometer painted on that board is empty. But you drive by 3 days later and they've raised some money for the stained glass window. Well, some of the thermometers painted in, right? And then you drive by 5 days later and more of the thermometer is painted in. It's because they've raised more money and en route to their goal. And then you drive by 2 weeks later and they've got the hooray, we did it, right? And the sign's out. Thank you to all our donors. We have enough money. We're going to go ahead and proceed with our stained glass window repair. Keep that vision in mind. That's what's happening on the right side of the screen with the testlets, okay? What I'm saying is individuals can still have the benefit of taking the individual testlets when they want, in this case, algebra, geometry, statistics, separately, or take them together if they want. And what they're trying to do is fill that thermometer with their performance on each of the respective testlets. So they get to take the testlets when they're ready. They get to bank the performance on each one. They get the benefit of those performance stacking, and therefore it gets to be compensatory in terms of the performance. So we didn't perform quite so hot in geometry. I can still make up for it by the fact that I have algebra and geometry or statistics performing a little bit better, for example. And what we are doing with a particularly unique feature of the testlet model is we're making it such that the candidate can go back and choose which testlet they want to take. They're not taking and passing and failing each one of them individually. That's subtests. What we're saying is, okay, Mr. Red, you didn't do so great in geometry, but if you think that you can come back on statistics where you perform particularly well and you can do even better and it helps you pull geometry across the finish line, then good for you. We're already doing this. Your neighbor to the southeast in Georgia is doing this for their entire program. Their entire program right now is made up of testlets. So Georgia decided we want to do a complete overhaul on what we're doing for educator certification testing here in the state of Georgia. What can we make that look like? We proposed a testlet model. They're doing it across the board. So the idea is Georgia moved to this idea of, we like the idea of the compensatory relationship in a single assessment. We like the idea of being able to do subtests with respect to banking scores and having candidates come back and take it when they want. And you get to overlay the compensation across the respective performance for each. We have testlets in the National Evaluation Series now. We're already doing it. It's It's available for elementary education, and it's available, and it will be, it's actually, registration's already open for, and the test launches for Foundations of Reading on August 31st. Other states are actually headed in that direction. It would take you all to decide if testlets for those respective assessments and other ones in the future are something that you would like to do or not. I do want to highlight one thing about this too, though, and then I'll certainly open up for questions, which is, in this particular circumstance, this is not a situation where we're saying the testlet model is, for example, standard error of measurement based. The flex assessments that I talked about first is driven by someone getting within a standard error measurement. This, completely separate, this is an option if you choose to implement it, where you could say, you know what, Matt, we like this idea. We're going to take, for example, the regular Foundations of Reading and put it aside, and we're going to replace it with the Foundations of Reading testlet model. It still covers all of the content that is represented by the regular exam. It just breaks it into the respective pieces into corresponding testlets. Okay, I've been watching the screen. I see people looking and then writing and then looking and then writing. Let me see if you all have any questions for me. Someone has to have at least one.
Okay, Matt. This is Ina. Help me understand with the testlet model. When I look at the, I'm looking at the slide you have up with the considerations, and I'm looking at blue, yellow, and red. If I'm a candidate and I'm taking particular subject area tests, I could take like one test on this day because I feel like I'm ready for it based on previous classwork. Then maybe next month I'm enrolled in a different class, or 2 months, then I could take another part of the overall test. And my scores bank up towards the passing overall score.
Everything you said is 100% correct.
Okay, thank you. And that passing score would be based on what Tennessee's cut score is.
Absolutely, yes.
So am I allowed to compare this to the praxis? Will you all allow this, just for my simple mind? What I'm asking is, let's just say that a praxis score is 200. Let's say, and someone goes in and takes that test and they score 200, even though they may have missed questions. Or if someone does the testlet model and they still score 200, even though they may have missed some questions, they've passed both tests.
Well, it's a great question. No, that's okay. This is exactly why we're doing this. The scales that we are using are different than the scales that ETS is using for the praxis tests. To be clear, I am not here to say one scale is better than the other. I'm just saying that they're different. And let me give you a more concrete example. Lots of folks are familiar with the SAT, for example. And you probably all know that for one segment of the SAT, the scale for the score is 200 to 800. It's just a scale. The National Evaluation Series assessments in Tennessee are on a scale of 100 to 300. The 100 to 300 on the tests you all are using from the National Evaluation Series in Tennessee right now are the scale there. Doesn't mean anything relative to the scale associated with the SAT that's 200 to 800. And I'm choosing that one, the SAT, only because it's so different. Meaning, if we're on a 100 to 300 scale for the National Evaluation Series, and the SAT is on a 200 to 800, and someone said, oh my gosh, this person got 800 on the SAT, but they only got a 300 on the National Evaluation Series, that statement sounds odd because 800 and 300 sound like they're light years apart. But what are we actually saying? The person that got 800 on the SAT got a perfect score. The person that got a 300 on the National Evaluation Series exam got a perfect score. So what I'm trying, I moved away from your praxis question only because I was choosing the SAT because the scale is so different. So all that's to say, you won't be able to look at a 200 on Praxis and a 200 on the National
Sure.
Evaluation Series and ask yourself if they're the same thing, because they're not.
So Tennessee would need to set the criteria for a Teslet model, just hypothetically, if that's what were to be used.
Yes, but we, Pearson would bring to the department ideas and recommendations for what that could look like. We wouldn't walk in the door and say, "Hey, board, what do you want to do?" and just leave it to you all to have to figure out. Of course, we'll have recommendations and methodologies to help you make the decision without steering you in a particular direction.
One other question, and I should have asked this sooner, but so forgive me, but you won't have to go back with your slide deck. With the Flex portfolio assessment platform, I know there are no dumb questions, but you're going to think this is a dumb question. I'm sure there are guardrails for AI generated responses that a candidate might submit.
So yes, however, however is the wrong word. I'm going to start with, it's a great question, not a dumb question. Mostly because everyone is talking about the role of AI, particularly at home, generated material. So a couple of things. First, in some of the states that we're working with, the states have their own AI policies associated with the expectations of what the candidate should be able to use AI for versus not. Even further than that, some states have said, we state are not making a recommendation for what the AI policy should be, in part because lots and lots and lots, or potentially in some states, all of the colleges and universities that prepare future educators have their own AI policies. And in a state that I'm thinking of, and I'm actually not going to name it right now, they chose not to have a statewide policy as it relates to their assessments because the individual programs have their own AI policies, and because they differ, from preparation to preparation program, they didn't want to actually overlay a policy on top of that. So they're letting the educator preparation programs have their own. With respect to the role of AI in the Flex, though, you wouldn't believe the number of maybe you would believe the number of conversations that I take part in that are sort of the tug of war. And what I mean by that is, one conversation says, well, boy, no one should be using AI to help them prepare their response. And then the next conversation, almost in the same breath, is, but all these people who are going to become teachers need to know the proper use of AI because they will be using it as it relates to the role of AI in their preparation of lesson plans, implementation in their classrooms, etc. So then, because those two things are in the same breath, the question ends up becoming, so what do we tell people they can do and cannot do on a tool that they're actually creating from home to submit for scoring, when hopefully the next day they get their certificate, the day after that they're performing in the classroom and they're using AI a whole lot. My wife is actually sitting in another room right now, and she's an elementary school teacher and a reading specialist. She's using AI every day, but she's using it in a way that actually benefits her. I'm giving you a long answer, but it's an ongoing conversation.
Thank you very much.
Other questions from folks?
Matt, this is Jerry.
Hi there, Jerry. Jerry, I think
just
must have sound if he's joining us. Hi there, Jerry.
I just wanted to say I was able to solve my connectivity issues, or should I say Barnes and Noble was able to solve my connectivity issues. But I did want to go back to the question about the two different scale scores for a second to make sure that there's a tacit understanding. While we use a scale score from 1 to 300, Praxis uses from 1 to 200, a passing score on both of those assessments represents an appropriate amount of knowledge that a candidate should have in order to pass the test. So while a 200 on one scale, you can't say that's a 200 on the other scale. Those scales are appropriate in determining what is an appropriate passing score on each of those distinct exams. So I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't any question about that.
Thank you, Jerry. Any other questions from folks?
I guess I have one. I think you've already addressed this, but just to be clear, there are some areas where we have not adopted NES series assessments. Am I understanding you correctly? We don't necessarily have to have adopted the regular assessment to adopt one of these testlets, or do you have to have both?
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
I understand your question. So I'm going to take your question and break it to pieces, realizing it's kind of ironic given the Tesla conversation. That's not intentional. With respect to the assessments that Tennessee has adopted, you all have adopted assessments that cover 59 different endorsement areas right now. There are a few endorsement areas for which there are not assessments, which I think is the second part of the conversation. And to your last point, no, you do not need to be in a situation where you have already adopted what I keep calling the regular test before adopting the corresponding testlet version. That said, the testlet assessment that is out there and doing its thing now in states that already want to use it in the National Evaluation Series is for elementary education. You did adopt the regular elementary education assessment. The next one that is coming out is the Foundations of Reading testlet version, which launches on August 31, so 6 weeks from now. And there will be other testlet examinations on their heels. If in any of those situations, meaning the LN testlets that already exist, the Foundations of Reading that's coming out imminently, or future testlet versions, you have the opportunity to adopt any and all of those, regardless of the choices you've already made in terms of which assessments you've already adopted versus not.
Got it. That's helpful. And in this case, it seems like our states adopt them assessment by assessment individually, as opposed to adopting it as a full program, saying we accept any and all testlets. Is that right?
Yeah. The answer to your question is yes. I will pause that just for a second to differentiate about what I said regarding Georgia. When Georgia chose to go the testlet route, they went a slightly different path than what we're bringing to you. So I'll start with the second thing first. We're bringing to you all the National Evaluation Series existing testing program and the assessments that we continue to add to it. Georgia said, we want to start from scratch, and we're going to build everything from scratch specifically for Georgia. And when we do all of that, we're going to build them all in the testlet model.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Matt, can you share the cost of a testlet for a candidate?
Yep. So I'll give you the short version is it's the cost of the regular examination simply divided by the number of testlets. What I mean by that is I want to pick a nice even number so I can do the math in my head. So let's say that the test is $120. The regular full examination, if it's 120. If we build the testlet based version of that examination and it has 6 testlets in it, all we're doing is 120 divided by 6, so each testlet is $20.
And is there a number of days between a candidate, let's say they have to take one testlet and they do not meet the criteria to have a passing score? How many days before they could retake another testlet?
Yeah, this great question. 2 answers to your question. So first, let's just say that, well, I'm going to continue to use the math example. So if it's testlets in algebra, geometry, and statistics, and they just take the algebra testlet, regardless of their performance, we're going to ask them to wait 30 days. But they haven't taken the other 2 testlets yet, so they could go and register for the other testlet now and take them when they're ready. So the retake wait period is only based on the fact that they took a specific testlet. You're welcome.
anyone have any other questions for our friends who have joined us from UTS and Pearson?
This is Sarah. Thank you all so much. I had a similar question to Dr. Maxwell on sort of the use of AI for particularly some of the open-ended. I assume it's similar like with Pearson and ETS, but is there anything different in the praxis that you would say about that, if that's applicable? Because I think I'm just still thinking about sort of the possibility of disingenuous responses versus, really allowing people to have this opportunity. That's the thing that's kind of bumping in my head right now, is how you guard against that.
I think that was for the praxis
Yeah,
version, right? Just
yeah,
make
Lisa,
sure-
do you have anything else? Sorry. Not to call you out directly, but if there's anything else that you would add besides what Matt had shared, I'm just curious to know how you.
No, I wouldn't add anything else. For our praxis bridge though, it's not a portfolio based, so it's not an essay based. It really is that professional development where they're going through online objectives, reteaching the practice, and then they do a knowledge check at the end. So, I think we discussed this with the question of it's possible that someone could go out and Google, let's say, the answer and then answer it just in similarities to those pieces that they could create, not their own work in a portfolio, right? I think both pieces have that potential for that, but without it being proctored and without it being watched that someone's actually doing that. Yeah. So I wouldn't add anything else.
Thanks.
Well, I think we are just about out of time. I just want to thank our guests, Lisa, Matt, Jerry, and our friends at the Department of Education, and also just note that I think it's a really healthy conversation that we're having, just to be able to continue to talk about what it means to hold a license in Tennessee and consider, the rigor that we expect of prospective educators and the qualifications to become licensed. I'll also just add, we border 8 states, and so we have a unique situation where about 50% of our licensed teachers come from another state. And so in some aspects, we're kind of dependent on all the wonderful licensure policies of those 8 states. And so we, while we're really kind of trying to put a stake in the ground in Tennessee, there are certainly end runs folks can make to be able to transfer their credentials or the program completion elsewhere, get a license in another state, and ultimately transfer that license here. So it's kind of a unique situation we're in, I think, because we border so many states. But again, I'm just grateful for the fact that we're still having conversations about teacher quality. That hasn't always been true. We've had a period where we had to talk a whole lot more about shortages. So thanks to everyone. Any final words or thoughts?
Michael, I think this whole process has been very helpful, especially, with in a time like this when we have 2 new board members who've just come on the board in the last several months, to see the balancing act that we need to do and to give them an opportunity to listen to some of these options while also listening to their consciences about what they think the best way forward is. And that isn't always something that can be done in a 10-minute discussion or a 15-minute discussion in a board meeting. So topics like this are of a real special use, especially as folks are kind of gearing up and finding their footing on the board.
I agree, Nathan. Michael, these are very helpful. I've enjoyed each of the member learning sessions that you've conducted or the team has conducted for us. So I just really appreciate Lisa and Matt and Jerry being here and providing us with the information that helps us to try to make the best informed decision possible.
We're always happy to contribute. So these conversations are as important to us as it is to you folks. So we thank you for your time.
All right. On that note, hope everyone enjoys the rest of their week. And, this isn't the last time we'll talk about this. Obviously, I think the department said November would be when we'd see this again. So there's certainly time between now and then. If you all think of any additional questions that you didn't get to ask or want to run by the folks who have joined us here, please feel free to send them our way and we'll make sure that you get answers. But hope everyone has a good rest of the week. Bye, everyone.
Folks.